The massive warship emerged from hyperspace like a predator breaking the surface of still waters. Its obsidian hull, stretching nearly 2 kilometers, cast an ominous shadow over Earth's orbital defense platforms. Commander Kralfax stood at the bridge's observation deck, his crystalline armor reflecting the pale blue glow of the planet below. 3 centuries of combat had earned him the title the Unmade, for no opponent had ever managed to leave a single scratch on his perfect form. The humans' primitive detection systems had already noticed his arrival. Their global defense networks buzzed with activity, missiles primed, and energy weapons charged. Kralfax allowed himself a moment of amusement. In all his years of conquest across 17 galaxies, no civilization had ever succeeded in preventing what was about to unfold. "Initiate the broadcast," he commanded, his voice resonating through the ship's neural network. Within seconds, every screen, device, and communication system on Earth received his transmission. His image, a towering figure of living crystal and impossible grace, appeared before humanity. "I am Kralfax of the Nexus Empire, sovereign of the 17 streams, and bearer of the unmade crown." His words translated perfectly into every human language simultaneously. "I come seeking your greatest warrior, one champion to face me in single combat. Should your champion prove worthy, Earth shall be granted protection under the Nexus banner. Should they fail..." He let the implication hang in the artificial atmosphere. In the United Earth Defense Council's emergency chamber, generals and politicians argued frantically. They had heard of Kralfax. Intelligence reports from distant colonies spoke of his undefeated record across thousands of worlds. The pattern was always the same. He would challenge a world's strongest fighter, defeat them with terrifying efficiency, and add their planet to the ever-expanding Nexus Empire. "We need our best Special Forces operator," General John declared, pounding his fist on the holographic table. "No, an Olympic combat athlete," another counselor countered. "Someone with peak human physical condition." But in a quiet corner of the chamber, Dr. Sarah Chen, head of the Quantum Defense Initiative, spoke up. "You're all approaching this wrong," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. The room fell silent as she stood, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses. "Look at the data. Every world that sent their strongest warrior lost. Every single one. We need to change the paradigm." "What are you suggesting, Dr. Chen?" Council President Adebayo leaned forward, intrigued. Sarah pulled up a holographic display, showing analyses of Kralfax's previous encounters. "He expects strength. He understands combat. But what he's never faced is someone who completely redefines the nature of the challenge itself." She took a deep breath. "I volunteer as Earth's champion." The chamber erupted in protests. Sarah Chen was brilliant, yes, a pioneer in quantum mechanics and theoretical physics, but she was no warrior. At 5'6" and 120 pounds, she looked more at home in a laboratory than a battlefield. "This is insanity," General Zhang spat. "We need a fighter, not a scientist." "With all due respect, General," Sarah replied calmly, "fighting is just applied physics, and I happen to be very good at physics." Before anyone could object further, she had already transmitted her acceptance to Kralfax's ship. The crystalline warrior received the response with curiosity. The data packet contained a complete profile of Earth's chosen champion. Dr. Sarah Chen, Ph.D. in quantum physics, no combat experience, no enhanced abilities, no notable physical achievements. For the first time in 3 centuries, Kralfax felt something new. Confusion. Was this some kind of joke? A trick? He had expected a hulking warrior, a trained killer, or at least someone with impressive physical capabilities. Instead, they sent a scientist. His second in command, Valthar, reviewed the data with growing concern. "My lord, this must be a deception. No world would send such a weak champion." Kralfax studied Sarah's profile image, a simple ID photo showing her at a laboratory, smiling slightly at the camera. "No," he said finally. "There's something else at play here. The humans are planning something we don't understand." He felt a strange sensation in his crystalline core. Anticipation. Meanwhile, in her laboratory, Sarah began her own preparations. As others might train with weapons or practice combat moves, she surrounded herself with quantum field equations and probability matrices. Her colleagues watched with a mixture of horror and fascination as she sketched complex diagrams and muttered about wave function collapse. "You realize you'll have to actually fight him, right?" Her assistant, Marcus, asked nervously. "This isn't a physics exam." Sarah smiled, making one final adjustment to the device on her wrist, a prototype quantum field manipulator she'd been developing. "Everything in the universe follows physical laws, Marcus, even an undefeated alien warrior." She looked up at the massive warship visible through her laboratory window. "The question isn't whether I can fight him. The question is, what happens when an unmovable object encounters an opponent who can rewrite the laws of movement itself?" As the sun set over Earth's major cities, two very different preparations were underway. In his ship, Kralfax honed his already perfect combat forms, his crystalline body moving with impossible precision. And in a quiet lab, Sarah Chen completed her calculations, ready to prove that in the face of impossible odds, human ingenuity could change the very rules of the game. The dawn before the challenge painted Earth's sky in shades of crimson and gold. In the depths of her laboratory, Sarah Chen hadn't slept. Holographic displays surrounded her workstation, each showing different aspects of her analysis of Kralfax's crystalline physiology. Her quantum field manipulator hummed softly on her wrist, its experimental circuitry pulsing with possibilities. "The crystalline structure is the key," she muttered, manipulating a three-dimensional model of Kralfax's molecular composition. Perfect atomic alignment. No imperfections. No wonder he's never been defeated. His body is literally unbreakable by conventional forces. Marcus handed her another cup of coffee, his hands shaking slightly. "That's not exactly reassuring, Dr. Chen. The challenge starts in 6 hours, and you're telling me he's literally indestructible." Sarah's eyes never left the display. "Indestructible doesn't mean unbeatable, Marcus. In quantum mechanics, the observer affects the observed. We just need to observe him differently." She adjusted her glasses, a habit that helped her focus. "Besides, I'm not trying to destroy him. I'm trying to teach him something." Above Earth's atmosphere, Kralfax observed his own preparations through a different lens. His private chamber aboard the warship had been converted into a combat simulation space. Holographic projections of Sarah Chen's movements, taken from security footage and public appearances, played on endless loop as he studied his unusual opponent. "She moves like no warrior I've ever encountered," he commented to Valfar. "No combat stance, no defensive posturing. It's as if she doesn't even consider physical conflict a possibility." Valfar, ever the traditionalist, scoffed. "Perhaps because she's not a warrior at all, my lord. This could still be some human deception. They might be planning to substitute a different champion at the last moment." Kralfax's crystalline form shifted, creating patterns that reflected his deep thought. "No, there's something we're missing. Look at her eyes in these recordings. That's not the gaze of someone planning deception. That's the look of someone who sees something we don't." In the United Earth Defense Council chamber, the atmosphere was tense. Military leaders watched live feeds from both Sarah's laboratory and Kralfax's ship, trying to predict what would happen when scientist met warrior. General Zhang paced nervously, his decorated uniform at odds with his disheveled appearance after a sleepless night. "We should have picked a real fighter," he muttered for the 100th time. What can a physicist do against a being that's never been defeated in combat? Council President Adebayo watched the feeds thoughtfully. "Perhaps that's exactly why we needed a physicist. Every military solution has failed against him. Maybe it's time for a different approach." In her lab, Sarah made final adjustments to her quantum field manipulator. The device was her life's work, a tool designed to manipulate quantum probability fields in localized spaces. Originally intended for breakthrough experiments in quantum computing, it now represented Earth's best hope. "Marcus," she called to her assistant, "remember what Einstein said about quantum entanglement? Spooky action at a distance." Exactly. But what most people forget is that he said it because he couldn't believe it was possible. Sometimes, the most powerful forces in the universe seem impossible until someone proves they're real. She stood up, stretching muscles stiff from hours of work. The universe doesn't care what we believe is possible. It only cares about what actually is. As the challenge hour approached, both champions made their final preparations. Kralfax performed his pre-combat ritual, his crystalline body humming with frequencies that made the air itself vibrate. Each movement was perfect, each stance flawless, the result of centuries of refined combat expertise. Sarah's preparation was markedly different. She sat cross-legged on her laboratory floor, surrounded by equations floating in holographic space. Her eyes were closed, but her mind raced through quantum probability calculations, mapping out possibilities that existed in the space between conventional reality. "Dr. Chen," Marcus interrupted softly, "they're ready for you." Sarah opened her eyes and stood, straightening her simple black lab coat. She checked her quantum field manipulator one last time, its subtle blue glow reflecting off her glasses. "You know what's funny, Marcus? Everyone keeps asking me how I plan to fight him. But nobody's asked why he fights in the first place." She walked toward the laboratory door, then paused. "Kralfax has spent centuries proving he's the strongest warrior in the universe. But strength isn't just about winning fights. Sometimes it's about understanding why we fight at all." As Sarah stepped into the transport that would take her to the designated challenge arena, news broadcasts worldwide focused on her calm expression. Humans across the globe watched with a mixture of hope and fear as their unconventional champion prepared to face humanity's greatest challenge. In his ship, Kralfax received the signal that his opponent was ready. For the first time in centuries, he felt a strange sensation in his crystalline core. Uncertainty. This human, this scientist, approached their confrontation with a serenity that defied all his experience. She wasn't afraid, wasn't boasting, wasn't radiating the desperate determination he'd seen in countless champions before. "Begin transport sequence," he commanded, his form shimmering as the teleportation field engaged. As the energy wrapped around him, a thought crossed his perfect crystalline mind. In all his centuries of combat, no opponent had ever made him question the nature of the challenge itself. The challenge arena materialized around them. A vast circular platform suspended in Earth's upper atmosphere, protected by advanced force fields that created a breathable environment. Sunlight reflected off Kralfax's crystalline form, sending rainbow refractions dancing across the arena's surface. Sarah stood opposite him, her lab coat rippling in the artificial atmosphere, the quantum field manipulator on her wrist casting a subtle blue glow. Billions watched through global broadcasts as the most unlikely duel in human history began. Kralfax towered over Sarah, his perfect crystalline body, making her look even smaller by comparison. Yet she showed no fear, instead studying him with the focused curiosity of a scientist observing a fascinating phenomenon. "Dr. Sarah Chen," Kralfax's voice resonated through the arena. "You face the unmade, champion of the Nexus Empire. Do you understand the terms of this challenge?" Sarah nodded, adjusting her glasses. "I do. Though I have a question, if you'll permit it." When Kralfax inclined his head, she continued, "In all your centuries of combat, has anyone ever asked why you choose to fight?" The question caught him off guard. His crystalline form shifted, creating patterns that reflected his confusion. Choice is irrelevant. Combat proves superiority. Superiority ensures order. "Interesting hypothesis," Sarah replied, her fingers moving subtly over her quantum field manipulator. "Shall we test it?" Kralfax moved with explosive speed, his crystalline arm extending into a blade that should have ended the fight in seconds. But where Sarah had been standing, reality seemed to blur. His perfect strike passed through empty space as she appeared 2 meters to the left, still looking at him with that same analytical expression. Impossible. Valthar's voice crackled through Kralfax's neural link. Our sensors indicate no technology capable of such movement. Kralfax launched a series of perfect attacks, each one a killing blow that had ended hundreds of battles before. Each time, Sarah seemed to exist in a state of quantum uncertainty, never quite where his strikes landed. She wasn't dodging. She simply existed in a probability state that made contact impossible. Fascinating, Sarah commented, as if she were conducting an experiment rather than fighting for Earth's survival. Your atomic structure is even more perfect than I hypothesized. But perfection can be a weakness, you know. It leaves no room for adaptation. Rage rippled through Kralfax's crystalline form, an emotion he hadn't felt in centuries. Stand and fight, scientist. Face me with honor. But I am fighting, Sarah replied calmly. I'm just doing it in a way you've never encountered. You see, quantum mechanics teaches us that reality isn't as solid as we think. At the smallest scales, everything exists in a state of probability until it's observed, including you. She raised her hand, the quantum field manipulator pulsing with energy. Suddenly, Kralfax felt something impossible. Uncertainty in his perfect crystalline structure. Where his form had always been absolute, now probability waves rippled through him, making his very existence fluid. What are you doing to me? For the first time in 3 centuries, Kralfax's voice held a tremor. I'm observing you differently, Sarah explained, her voice gentle despite the enormous energies she was manipulating. Your perfect crystalline form exists because you've never allowed for the possibility of imperfection. But quantum mechanics tells us that the act of observation affects reality. Right now, I'm observing you not as an undefeated warrior, but as a being capable of change. Kralfax tried to attack again, but his movements became uncertain. His perfect forms, honed over centuries, seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. The more he tried to maintain his absolute perfection, the more it slipped away. In orbit above them, Valthar watched in disbelief as his sensors tried to make sense of what was happening. My lord, your quantum signature is shifting. She's somehow affecting your fundamental structure. Sarah stepped forward, her quantum field manipulator creating patterns of probability that danced around both of them. You've spent centuries proving you're the strongest. But strength isn't just about being unbreakable. Sometimes, true strength lies in being willing to change. The crystalline warrior staggered, his perfect form now shimmering with possibilities. This is not combat. This is not how battles are won. Isn't it? Sarah asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. You challenged us to send our greatest warrior, but humanity's greatest strength isn't our ability to fight. It's our ability to question, to observe, to change the rules when the old ones don't serve us anymore. As she spoke, the quantum field expanded, creating a space where reality itself seemed to hold its breath. In this moment of infinite possibility, Kralfax faced something he'd never encountered in all his centuries of combat. The chance to be something other than perfect, something other than undefeated. The choice is yours, Sarah said softly. You can remain the unmade, forever perfect and unchanging. Or you can allow yourself to be remade, to discover what lies beyond perfection. The arena fell silent as all of humanity watched their champion offer their greatest enemy not defeat, but transformation. And in that silence, Kralfax faced the most difficult challenge of his existence, the possibility of change. In the quantum-charged atmosphere of the arena, Kralfax's crystalline form flickered between states of being. The perfect lattice structure that had defined him for centuries now danced with possibilities, each probability wave offering a different version of what he could become. The universe held its breath, waiting for his choice. 300 years, he spoke, his voice resonating with new harmonics. 300 years of combat, and no one has ever. He paused, struggling with concepts that had never before entered his perfect consciousness. No one has ever shown me another way. Sarah maintained the quantum field, her device humming with controlled power. Because they all tried to beat you at your own game, but sometimes winning means changing the game entirely. Above them, Valthar's sensors were going haywire. My lord, your quantum signature is stabilizing. But it's different. The perfect crystal matrix is evolving into something new. The change began at Kralthax's core, where once there had been only rigid perfection. Now there were subtle variations, beautiful imperfections that caught the light in ways his former self never could. His crystalline body became something more organic, more alive. Not weakened, but transformed. I feel. He struggled to find words for sensations he'd never experienced. I feel everything. Every possibility, every path not taken. How do you humans live with such uncertainty? Sarah smiled, finally lowering her hand as the quantum field stabilized around them. That uncertainty is what drives us forward. It's why we explore, why we question, why we never stop trying to understand the universe around us. Perfect certainty might seem like strength, but it's really just stagnation. The implications of this revelation rippled through Kralthax's consciousness. Every battle he'd fought, every world he'd conquered, all in pursuit of proving a perfection that now seemed meaningless. The Nexus Empire. We've been wrong. All this time, we thought we were spreading order through strength, but we were really just refusing to grow. Sarah completed his thought. Refusing to change, to adapt, to learn. But it's not too late to choose a different path. In orbit, Valthar watched the transformation with growing understanding. The sensor readings from Kralthax now showed something unprecedented. A crystalline structure that was both ordered and chaotic, both perfect and imperfect, containing multitudes of possibilities within its new form. News of what was happening spread across the globe and beyond. Humans and aliens alike watched as the universe's greatest warrior was not defeated, but transformed. In the United Earth Defense Council chamber, silence reigned as they witnessed something more powerful than any victory in combat. My people believe that true strength lies in perfection, Kralthax said, examining his changed form with newfound wonder. But you've shown me that true perfection lies in the ability to change, to grow, to become more than what we are. Sarah nodded, her quantum field manipulator now dark and quiet. That's humanity's greatest strength. Not our ability to fight, but our ability to adapt, to question, to imagine different possibilities. We're not perfect, and we never will be. But that's exactly what makes us strong. The implications of this moment extended far beyond the arena. Across the galaxy, other crystalline warriors of the Nexus Empire watched their champion's transformation. Some reacted with horror at the loss of perfection, but others saw something new and wonderful in the change. Dr. Chen. Kralthax's voice carried a new resonance, harmonics of possibility vibrating through his transformed being. You have not just changed me. You have changed everything. The Nexus Empire cannot continue as it was. Not after this. Change can be frightening, Sarah acknowledged. But it can also be beautiful. Look at yourself. You're not weaker for having embraced imperfection. You're stronger, more complex, more alive. Around them, the force field of the arena began to dissolve. The challenge was over, but not in any way the protocols had anticipated. There was no victor or vanquished. Instead, there was transformation, understanding, and the birth of something entirely new. Valthar's voice crackled through the communication system, but it carried none of its former militant certainty. My lord, the other Nexus worlds are calling. They're asking about what happened, about what it means. Kralthax looked at his transformed form, then at the small human scientist who had shown him a truth centuries of combat had never revealed. It means, Valthar, that the age of the unmade is over. It's time for all of us to be remade. As the sun set over Earth, casting long shadows through the dissipating arena field, humanity had gained more than just survival. They had shown the galaxy a new kind of strength, one that came not from perfection or power, but from the courage to embrace change, to face uncertainty, and to imagine new possibilities. 1 year after the historic encounter, the Great Hall of the Nexus Central Command hummed with a new kind of energy. Where once there had been only the perfect geometric patterns of crystalline architecture, now organic curves and deliberate imperfections created spaces that felt alive with possibility. Krulfax, his form still shimmering with quantum-inspired changes, stood before a gathered assembly of representatives from both the Nexus Empire and Earth. The Nexus Earth Scientific Exchange Program enters its second phase today, he announced, his voice carrying harmonics that would have been impossible in his former perfect form. Our civilizations have much to learn from each other. Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's chief ambassador to the Nexus Empire, stood beside him. The quantum field manipulator on her wrist had been refined through collaboration with Nexus crystalline engineers, leading to breakthroughs in both quantum physics and crystalline evolution. In just 1 year, she addressed the assembly. We've seen advancements that neither of our civilizations could have achieved alone. The Nexus Empire's perfect crystalline technology, combined with human creativity and quantum understanding, has opened doors we never knew existed. The changes were evident throughout Nexus society, where once the crystalline warriors had sought only combat and conquest, now they explored the art of transformation. Their perfect forms had become matrices of possibility, each individual choosing their own path of evolution while maintaining the strength of their crystalline nature. Valthar, who had undergone his own transformation, now led the Nexus Research Division. Our latest findings suggest that the quantum state manipulation techniques developed by Dr. Chen can be applied to solve problems we once thought impossible. We're not just changing forms, we're changing how we think about reality itself. The impact extended far beyond science and technology. The Nexus Empire, once feared across 17 galaxies, had become a catalyst for cultural exchange and peaceful advancement. Their warrior tradition hadn't been abandoned, but transformed. Now they fought not to prove superiority, but to protect and nurture growth. The greatest battle, Krulfax often said in his new role as Chief Ambassador of Transform, is not against an external enemy, but against our own resistance to change. On Earth, the influence of the Nexus transformation rippled through human society. The quantum principles that had changed Krulfax found applications in medicine, technology, and even psychology. Humanity began to understand that strength could be found not in rigid certainty, but in the willingness to exist in states of beautiful uncertainty. The United Earth Defense Council had been reorganized into the Earth Nexus Cooperation Initiative. General Zhang, who had once doubted sending a scientist to face a warrior, now worked alongside crystalline researchers to develop defensive systems that protected through adaptation rather than mere force. "Remember when I said fighting was just applied physics?" Sarah asked during a private moment with Krulfax as they watched a sunrise that painted the crystalline spires of Nexus Central in impossible colors. "I was wrong. It's not about fighting at all. It's about understanding." Krulfax's form shimmered with agreement, and understanding requires us to be willing to change, to be imperfect, to grow. He turned to face her, his crystalline structure now a complex matrix of order and chaos, strength and flexibility. "You know, in all my centuries of combat, I thought I was teaching other civilizations about strength. Instead, a scientist from Earth taught me what strength really means." The quantum field manipulator on Sarah's wrist pulsed softly, resonating with the new frequencies of Krulfax's being. "We all have something to teach each other. That's why the universe is full of different civilizations, different approaches, different ways of thinking. Perfection isn't about being unchanging. It's about being perfectly willing to change." As news of the Nexus transformation spread across the galaxies, other civilizations began to reach out. Species that had hidden from the Nexus Empire's former military might now sought to join the exchange of ideas and possibilities. The age of rigid perfection had given way to an era of beautiful uncertainty, where strength was measured not by unchanging power, but by the ability to grow, adapt, and transform. What happens next? Valthar asked during a council meeting, his own crystalline form now a testament to the beauty of controlled chaos. Sarah smiled, adjusting her glasses in that familiar gesture that had once seemed so out of place in combat. "That's the best part," she said. "We don't know." And that uncertainty, that endless field of possibility, that's what makes the future perfect. In the quantum-enhanced observatories of Earth, scientists and crystalline scholars work together, exploring the mysteries of the universe. In the training halls of the Nexus Empire, warriors learn to fight not by maintaining perfect forms, but by embracing the flow of change. And in the space between galaxies, where once there had been only the threat of conquest, now there was the promise of transformation. The universe's greatest warrior had faced a human and been changed forever. But more than that, two civilizations had learned that the greatest strength lies not in being unmade, but in being willing to be remade, again and again, in the endless dance of possibility.